Hey, some interesting new polling data out this weekend as we sit about 3.5 months from the midterm elections. I need an expert, and thank God we have an expert. He is Jim McLaughlin, a political strategist and public opinion expert, to help me drill down on these numbers. Jim, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure, Joe.
So, the NBC Wall Street Journal just came out with some new polling data. And again, you're the expert, but just generally, Jim, as I look at these numbers, it appears that President Trump is doing as well as he's ever done with his supporters, but he's doing almost as worse as he's ever done with folks in the middle.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. The interesting thing is we actually also did a poll not too long ago, and it's on our website, McLaughlinonline.com, and where he had a 49 approval rating and a 49 disapprove. But we're also seeing is his numbers, the base loves President Trump, and you're seeing it in these primaries where all the candidates are basically falling all over one another to try to get President Trump's endorsement in these Republican primaries. But also notice in a lot of these important swing states in the U.S. Senate elections, none of the Democrats are actually attacking the president. And the interesting part is you've even got some Democrats out there like Joe Manchin and Claire McCaskill and Heidi Heitkamp that are actually trying to tie themselves to President Trump and actually talk about issues where they've actually agreed with him on. So the truth of the matter is, too, is the other thing to look at with the president is his numbers aren't just good among the Republican base. It's almost the opposite of Barack Obama. Barack Obama had a better favorable rating than he had a job approval rating. People wanted to like him, but he wasn't doing a good job. Donald Trump has good numbers better numbers when you start talking about the specific issues, things like national security, things like the economy. His numbers go up because people are giving him credit for doing a good job.
And Jim, when you look at like NBC Wall Street Journal, they've got 88% of Republican voters approve of the job the president's doing. I mean, just some context, is that a super strong number, or is that fairly typical for a Republican president?
It's very strong. And not only that, when we test intensity among Republican primary voters, and especially I'm doing a lot of the races that we're working on, you know, you usually have anywhere from 2/3 to 3/4 of the voters will tell you they strongly approve of the job the president is doing. And again, in that Wall Street Journal poll, one of the things that hasn't really been talked about, but, you know, folks have mentioned that his job approval overall had gone up to about 45% in their poll among registered voters. Like I said, in our poll of likely voters, it was up at 49%. But he was also in that Wall Street Journal plus 15 when it came to the economy and creating jobs. And that's a great sign for him because usually elections, they're decided on what I call the 2 Ps, peace and prosperity. And he's doing well on both those accounts right now. He's keeping us, you know, he's keeping America safe. And he's also, you know, he gets getting very good numbers when it comes to the economy.
So, Jim, based on your experience, that's a pretty...
Exactly. Like I said, it's just the opposite of Barack Obama. That was one of the things the mainstream media never talked about in the last election. But we were seeing in a lot of these close battleground races, in both the statewide races and the battleground congressional races, usually by a margin of about 20 points, voters wanted to change direction and move away from President Barack Obama's policies. Now you're seeing where the voters are actually agreeing with the president on his policies. And again, his image, his opinion rating isn't quite matching up with his job approval rating. And that's going to be one of the challenges. You brought it up before is, yes, he's got a lot of intensity with the base. And the base is always really important in these midterm elections because that's how you get folks to turn out in these lower turnout elections. But the key thing is he going to be able to expand his support among those independents, among those swing voters?
And Jim, just to drill down on one more number from the NBC poll, so 88% of Republicans approve of him, 29% strongly approve, according to NBC Wall Street Journal. Is that 29% low, or is that a pretty decent number, who strongly approve?
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I've seen much higher strongly approve among the base. And 29% is not what I'm necessarily seeing. I think one of the differences, they're doing registered voters versus, most campaign pollsters. We're always doing likely voters.
Yeah. Hey, so shift to independents. Again, according to NBC Wall Street Journal, help us with this. Only 36% of independents approve of the job he's doing, and that's his lowest number among independents. Is that cause for concern, or who knows?
That's the challenge for him. He's going to need to up those numbers among those independents and among those swing voters. Like I said, we've been seeing his job approval rating among those independents kind of hover between the low 40s and the mid 40s, depending upon what's going on with the electorate at the time. But what happens is in a lot of these media polls, and I think you probably know, we actually predicted the president's victory right before Election Day in November of 16. Yeah. And one of the reasons we did that was we saw the surge that he was getting among those independents, among those swing voters. And what was happening in those media polls, they weren't necessarily talking to likely voters. The other thing that you see in a lot of these media polls is they tend to underrepresent Republicans. Self-described Republicans accounted for about a third of the electorate in November of 2016. And that's usually the case also in the midterm elections. Some of these media polls you're seeing, some of them are only having about 23, 25% of their...
I think I lost Jim, everybody. We will try to get him back. There you are. Jim, are you back?
Yeah, I think I'm still here. But anyway, what you're seeing is those independent voters, they're in a lot of ways, they're going to be tough for either.
We'll get that fixed. Yeah, Jim, stick around. We'll be back. I want to drill down on this and what all of this portends for the midterms. Don't go anywhere. We are back with an in-depth look at how President Trump is standing about 3.5 months out from the midterm. Hopefully we have our expert, political strategist Jim McLaughlin, back. Jim, are you there with me?
I am there, Joe.
Beautiful. So let's shift a little bit toward the midterms. And again, I want to keep putting this NBC Wall Street Journal poll in front of you so that you can swat it down. According to them, independents want a Democrat Congress like 48 to 26%. Is that a concern?
The truth of the matter is I'm not seeing numbers like that in my surveys, to be quite honest with you. And again, I think probably that has something to do with them going with registered voters. And the interesting part is I think a lot of these attacks right now that are going on out there against the president, whether it's on things like Korea, the Russia investigation, I think in many ways they're going to backfire because the president is out there every day talking about the issues that matter most to the voters. He's talking about the economy. He's talking about jobs. He's talking about getting us better trade deals. He's talking about keeping us safe from MS-13 and terrorism and whatnot. And I think those are the things that are going to get his base ginned up during the midterm elections, because we know the Democrats, there's no question about it. They're ginned up. They're motivated for these elections. But I also think a lot of these attacks against the president, plus the extremism within the Democratic Party. I mean, right now, it's basically the socialists are running the Democratic Party, and some people say, well, that's a new phenomenon. It's really not a new phenomenon. I think the only real thing that's new about it is the Democrats are actually admitting they're socialists now. And I think those the things are not only going to help the base get motivated, but I think as we get closer and closer to Election Day, it's going to help Republicans move those independent voters.
Jim, as a former Republican in the House who is deathly afraid of the thought of Nancy Pelosi as Speaker again, I've always been worried about the enthusiasm gap between Democrat and Republicans. When you look at the enthusiasm gap, is there one, and how pronounced is it?
You know, the interesting part was the Republicans it wasn't noticed a lot in the 2017 elections, because we did a lot of work in places like New York and New Jersey and Virginia, and even some special elections down in Florida. The Democrats, they had an advantage on us in those elections. But what's happened is, since the Republicans have passed tax cuts, since folks are seeing the benefits of that, they're seeing the economy getting better, they're seeing the Republicans actually try to do things, and then you have basically the extreme and the obstructionist agenda of the Democrats. What you're seeing is that enthusiasm gap is shrinking right now. And it's going to be interesting because, again, yes, we predicted that President Trump was going to win back in November of 16, but after that last debate, well, the truth of the matter is Democrats were more motivated, and Hillary Clinton was probably about 4, 5, 6 points ahead at that point in time. But then you saw, especially the last 3 weeks of the election, you saw the president get Republicans motivated, get conservatives motivated, and I think, quite honestly, you're going to see the same type of thing happen in these elections.
So, Jim, you look at control of the House, control of the Senate. Where is this? Where's it at right now? When you look at the House in particular, is it a 50-50 kind of a deal, or who do you think has the edge at this point?
Right now, I think, look, the House in a lot of ways is up for grabs, because you think about it. During the first midterm, after the Democrats controlled everything in the 2010 elections, the Republicans picked up over 60 seats in the House. And I think the average is, the party in power loses about 40 seats. So for the Democrats to pick up the 23, 24 or so seats that they need to pick up, it's not that big a lift for them. So I think it is about a 50-50 proposition, but the Republicans have a lot of successes they can point to. And to the NRCC's credit, they're doing a great job in these individual races. I actually think when you look at the map when it comes to the U.S. Senate, I can see the Republicans actually picking up seats. I mean, Bill Nelson is really in danger down in Florida. Rick Scott's running a tremendous race, and I'd give Rick Scott the edge there. If you look in Missouri, Claire McCaskill is very vulnerable. Joe Manchin, I think, is going to be really tough to win there. And a lot of these Democrats, they have the problem of they're trying to say that they're not liberal Democrats, they're not Schumer, they're not Pelosi Democrats, they're not these socialists, but virtually all of them, they voted against the appointment of Neil Gorsuch, they voted against the Republican tax cuts, and when they had a chance to repeal and replace Obamacare, they were there with Democrats and Pelosi. And I think that's going to be a real problem for them in these elections, because it's very tough for them to say that they're moderates when those are the kinds of stands that.
Boy, Jim, thank you. Learned a bunch, learned a whole heck of a lot. Thank you, Jim McLaughlin, for joining me. An all-caps tweet warning to Iran from this president. What does it mean? We'll have that next.